everybody, and welcome back to the United Stand. I am Carrington with Rob Dawson from the ESPN. Rob, thank you very much for joining us. Let's get straight into things. Sir Jim Ratcliffe has been speaking, did a few sit-down interviews, one particular with Gary Neville, that raised a few eyebrows. What did you make of that, and how do you think Sir Jim came across in that interview, speaking about the future of the club?
Well, he's obviously very honest, and you can't argue with that as a football fan. You know, you want the owners or co-owners to be as honest as possible. I thought some of his comments were a little bit ill thought out, possibly. You know, talking about the squad and that players who are still here are not good enough or overpaid. I can kind of understand where he's coming from, and I'm sure a lot of United fans will agree with the sentiment, but to say it in the week where, in theory, you're playing your biggest game of the season against Real Sociedad, it's a squad that the confidence already looks like it's on the floor a little bit. Do you really need the co-owners sort of pointing the finger at you, saying that you're overpaid and not good enough? Maybe that's slightly ill-advised. I mean, I think the one thing is that lots of fans have always said that they want owners to communicate. It's the one thing that the Glazers have been, or one of the things that the Glazers have been really heavily criticised for. So you can't argue with the fact that he's done an interview, quite a long interview to kind of explain his side of things. So you can't argue with that. I just thought some of his comments maybe were a little bit ill-advised given the big week on the pitch that we've got. Yeah,
I mean, Gary Neville was obviously the guy that was conducting the interview. Yeah. There was a few other interviews done as well. He does seem to have some involvement with the regeneration project of Old Trafford. A few people have called that a conflict of interest. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, as a journalist, I would like Sir Jim Ratcliffe to talk to journalists. And Gary Neville, in fairness to him, it was a very good interview. I don't think that Gary ducked any of the questions. Yeah. I don't think that Jim ducked any of the answers. I think the local journalists, who followed the club, sort of the group of about 10 or 11 of us, would obviously welcome the opportunity to sit with Jim Ratcliffe in a room and put these questions to him in the way that we think is best. I think he could have been pressed more on the Glazers. You know, why has he got into bed with the Glazers? Why is he effectively propping them up? All that kind of thing. So obviously we would welcome that opportunity. At the moment, the two big kind of sit-down interviews that Sir Jim has done when he first took over, and now he's chosen to do with other broadcasters. Obviously that's his right. You can't argue with that. You know, he's the owner of the football club. He chooses to speak to whoever he wants. I just think in that respect, we would certainly the local journalists in Manchester would welcome the chance to question him and to speak to him. At the moment, we haven't had that opportunity. Hopefully in the future that may change. It doesn't feel like it right now, but obviously the journalists who follow the club all over the world would welcome that opportunity.
I feel as if Manchester United do begin to start being successful, that might change, because success is sometimes easier.
It's an easier interview, isn't it? At the moment,
exactly.
It's a tough interview. And I must say that Gary Neville did give him a fair grilling, actually. It wasn't kind of a particularly soft interview. I think there were questions that were left on the table a little bit. I think some Man United fans will have watched it and thought, there could have been other questions that were asked, maybe harder questions, particularly on the Glazer aspect. Because ultimately, we're talking about the football club taking meals away from people at Old Trafford, but you're paying $3 million a month in interest on Glazer debt. I mean, that's a massive thing that has to be dealt with and has to be spoken about, because ultimately Man United are in this financial position because of the Glazers. It's not about people working in the ticket office. It's not about free lunches at Old Trafford. Really, the questions need to be asked about the Glazers and Sir Jim's role with them and what's going to happen with that in the future.
I understand from Sir Jim's point of view, when you are working with people, you can't throw them under the bus. So he was obviously very reluctant to talk badly of the Glazer family. But it is known that they have contributed massively to the failure of this football club. They are the reason that this football club is failing, due to their ownership. Gary Neville did point out the negligence there.
He did.
Sir Jim kind of didn't really want to agree with him on that. You can understand it. But I think one thing that probably did attract Sir Jim to working with the Glazers was the opportunity of the regeneration project, the new stadium. And you could see with the plans that followed that interview that the team that he's put together, and him himself, very, very excited about what this could be. A tourist attraction, a money-making scheme. A few Manchester United fans are a little bit worried about what the direction the club is going in with that stadium. Some Manchester United fans are absolutely buzzing to have a state-of-the-art, world-class stadium and facilities and a regeneration project. I mean, how do you see it from Sir Jim's point of view?
Well, I think Sir Jim has been quite clear that it's one of the kind of cornerstones of his co-ownership. He was very, very clear very early on that he wanted to be part of the new stadium. I think everyone that goes to Old Trafford regularly will know that something has to be done with the stadium, whether it's a really extensive redevelopment or the building of a new stadium. Personally, I would be on the side of a redevelopment. I think that the history and the tradition of Old Trafford should be preserved if you possibly can. That said, I can understand the fans who want a new stadium because it does increase revenues. It's probably a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to build a new stadium. So, why would you not look to kind of have something that in Spurs mould is one of the best stadiums in the world? So I understand that argument, and certainly something needs to be done. My only issue with the plans that were announced yesterday in London is that I didn't feel that it had the match-going Manchester-based fans at its core. Lots of the talk was about, we want this to be an iconic stadium, a tourist attraction, somewhere where football fans from all over the world want to visit. I can understand the pull of that, because with that comes an awful lot of money and increased revenue, and then revenue gets put into the squad, and then you win more. So I get that. But that stadium, week after week, is filled with match-going fans from in and around Manchester and the UK. Ultimately, if you're building a new stadium, those are the people I would have thought that you would put first. And I've seen a lot of stuff on social media and Twitter and X and things about, Manchester United is a working class football club. You need to look after those working class people who are coming to the games and spending an awful lot of their hard-earned money to come to games, to put into your budget. You need to look after those first. And I thought lots of the plans were very impressive yesterday. I didn't feel really that it had the match-going regular Man United fan at its core. It's important to note now that the stadium and the concept of the stadium is just that, is a concept.
Yeah.
We are quite a long way from actually seeing that stadium built and people are watching matches in that stadium. So there is a long way to go, and maybe the tone, the narrative around the stadium will change eventually. I just felt that there could have been more of a nod to local Man United fans. Even having the announcement in London and not in Manchester felt a little bit off, and it was again something that people on social media said immediately. Why is this announcement being made in London? We are based in Manchester. We are Manchester-based fans of United. Why were we not kind of front and centre in this announcement? And it's a valid point.
It felt as if when Omar Berrada was doing the interviews afterwards that he was kind of putting it out there for worldwide brands to come and offer to collaborate and make sponsorship deals with the stadium moving forward. As we know, it's just a concept right now, but I think a lot of Manchester United fans think, since you've come into the football club, we're in 14th place. The squad is decimated. It doesn't feel like we're moving forward. It feels like all the energy has been put into a new stadium, a way to make money through the new stadium. And I understand that their vision for that is the money you make from that you can then invest into the team, and we need to become a club that makes profit.
Yeah.
And that's a big headline that you keep seeing through these interviews from Sir Jim and Omar Berrada. But just from you being in and around it, seeing what Omar says and seeing what the team that Sir Jim's put in place has been talking about, how do you think they feel like they are doing so far, and where do you think their priorities lie?
Yeah, well, obviously I was in London yesterday for the announcement. We did get time with Omar Berrada away from the cameras afterwards. I must say that Omar Berrada is a really impressive guy, in terms of his business knowledge, but also his football knowledge. He's obviously a very smart guy. He worked for a long time at City and was very, a big part of what they were able to achieve on and off the field. I think he's a great addition to Man United.
His CV's incredible.
Yeah, it is. And he was very, very clear during the conversations with us that his priority is performances on the pitch.
Okay, that's something the United fans want to hear.
No, and it is, and it's clear. And it was important for him to kind of clarify that, because I do agree that when Sir Jim was talking, it was all about kind of stadium this, stadium that. Omar Berrada was clear that the priority is winning football matches on the pitch. Now, he will say that in the long term, that's not going to be possible unless you have a massive new stadium generating an awful lot of revenue to pump back into the club. And I understand that argument. He was also very open about, what could this do to the squad in the short term. We obviously saw Arsenal and Spurs in particular struggle to remain competitive when they were building their new stadiums, because obviously some massive strain on finances, and it's only natural that money is kind of diverted away from strengthening the squad towards the stadium because you have to pay for it. And he was very open about that. He said that it's a risk. And you've got to kind of applaud his honesty. What he would hope is that United will be in a position in 3 years to stop losing money, they begin to make money again, and that the impact on the playing squad won't be as big as it possibly could be. you can only hope that he's kind of got his numbers right with that, and he really believes that that's on the cards, because ultimately United aren't competitive on the pitch right now anyway, and we've not even started building this stadium, so they need to remain. You can't have a situation where United are bouncing around sort of 9th, 10th, 11th in the league for 5 years while they wait for this new stadium to be built. I know Omar Berrada knew that. He wasn't sort of banging the drum for the stadium and saying this is a be-all and end-all. He was very, very clear that performances on the pitch come first.
And what did you make of Sir Jim's comments off the back of that about how they'll still be paying out transfer fees for basically, players that he basically said you don't think are good enough for United, and some of them who are still here, and then also United without me would have run out of money at Christmas time this year, and because of my money we've not done that, and that's why we're stripping the club back to its bare bones. What did you make of? He wanted to make it clear that money is extremely tight, and should Manchester United fans fear for the summer transfer window budget?
Yeah, I mean, first off, in terms of his comments on still paying for players in the summer, I didn't necessarily agree with that. It felt like he was pointing at players that fans already think are underperforming. He wasn't. He was talking about.
That's why we can't get new players.
Exactly. He was talking about Anthony, Højlund, Onana, Casemiro. These are all players that have had unbelievable stick on social media. There's a reason why he's plucked them out. And I just want to kind of highlight Rasmus Højlund. He's going through a tough time at the moment, Rasmus.
Very.
I don't think anyone, though, can argue with his effort and how hard he's trying. He clearly is someone who wants to do well for Man United. Confidence is already on the floor because of a dip in form. Does he really need to be hearing the co-owner point at him and saying, look, we're still paying for this guy in the summer? I thought that was ill-advised, particularly ahead of a massive game where you need.
He's the only striker that can play. Gino's not even eligible.
You need Rasmus Højlund to perform in that game. I didn't agree with that necessarily. In terms of the budget, I mean, if I was a Man United fan, I would worry slightly for the summer transfer window. I mean, even Omar Berrada, when he spoke to us, said that obviously if they qualify for the Champions League, that would affect revenue, and that would affect, again, what the transfer budget was. But he said that even if they did qualify for the Champions League, the word he used was cautious.
Wow.
That they're trying to change the way that they do things in terms of recruitment. And I think you've obviously just heard from Patrick Dorgu up there. That's quite a good example. He's a young player, plucked from Lecce in Serie A. He's on a relatively low wage compared to the rest of his teammates here. I think you'll find that Man United are trying to do more of those kind of deals instead of the Casemiro deals and the big money signings coming in, because United just can't afford it. There will be money to spend in the summer, regardless of whether they're in Europe or not. I do wonder whether they're going to take a very, very cautious approach to the summer and make sure they don't make any mistakes. And we've heard Ruben time and time again say we can't repeat these mistakes of the past, and he's right. United can't go in splashing loads of money that they haven't got on players who may or may not make it. You have to kind of build something towards the future, because this cycle at some stage has to be broken. You talked there about the list of players that Jim Radcliffe was kind of pointing at, saying these players haven't worked out. One of those was Anthony, who was signed by the previous manager, Erik ten Hag. These aren't guys that have been here for sort of 5, 6, 7 years who have been here over time and people have looked at and said they're not good enough. These are signings from sort of 2 and 3 years ago. At some stage, the cycle has to be broken, because you can't keep going down the road of throwing good money after bad and trying to fix it that way, because it just doesn't work. And in 5 years' time, you'll still be in the same spot saying that you've got no money. It has to be broken at some stage, and maybe this summer it will be kind of like a buffer almost. That the idea is to kind of start getting very, very small decisions right, rather than trying to get these big signings right, because it's just not worked in the past.
Yes, I completely agree with you on that, and it will be interesting to see how we attack that summer transfer window. A lot of fans really got a lot of anticipation going into that, because we will bring players in, but what calibre of players will we bring in, and how long will it take for us to compete, especially when you're going down the young routes time after time. But last question, because it's starting to rain as well as being absolutely freezing cold. Sir Jim did massively back Ruben Amorim, maybe because he has to, because there's no money left to get anyone else if he did want to. But Ruben Amorim's also, despite results, impressed a lot of the fans.
Yeah.
How do you feel the ownership view him, and what are your thoughts on how he's managed his tenure here so far?
I think he's been given an absolute hospital pass with what he's walked into.
Yeah.
I can understand why Man United wanted him here mid-season. I can understand why he didn't want to be here mid-season. I could also understand his view that you can't turn down Man United, because where else are you going to go from Sporting Lisbon? So I understand the reason he's here at this point. I think that he's managed a very, very, very difficult situation as well as he possibly could. I think he would probably be the first to tell you that he thought that it might have gone a little bit better. Even when we spoke to Omar Berrada yesterday, he said that it's been difficult. It's been a lot more difficult than they thought. I just don't think you can start to judge him until Christmas time next season. I think that
I'm completely in agreement with that one.
If results aren't better sort of towards Christmas and January, then you can start to look at it and say, well, maybe that this isn't working out. But I just think that with the injuries he's had, the squad he's inherited, the fact he's trying to change system, the things he's had to deal with off the pitch, the change of owner, all these kind of things, a lack of money in the transfer window, I just think all of that stuff gives him an absolute free pass. And ultimately, if United don't win another game between now and the end of the season, he should still be here at the start of next season. Because, I spoke before about changing the cycle of recruitment. At some stage, you have to stop what you've been doing. Mm-hmm. You have to...
We've talked about this in this spot before.
We have. And the last time I spoke to you, I think I said exactly the same thing. You can't just keep going down the same road. If you've decided that Ruben Amorim is your man, you've decided that you don't mind him playing 3-4-3 and it will work in the Premier League, then you've got to give him a chance. There's no point having him here for 6 months and then in the summer thinking, oh, well, maybe we made the wrong choice, maybe we need to move on. And the last thing that Man United can do now, and we talked about the summer budget there, it's going to be relatively limited. United can't be in sort of this halfway house where they kind of half back him with the players he needs and half back him with sort of club players.
Which is how it felt with Ten Hag.
With exactly how it felt with Ten Hag. You have to go into the summer fully believing that Ruben Amorim is your man. And if it doesn't work out and you get to January and it really hasn't worked out and you're 15th in the league, then fair enough. Then you start to look at it and think maybe we made a mistake. But you have to go into, regardless of what happens. If they get knocked out against Real Sociedad and they finish 17th in the league and barely avoid relegation, Ruben Amorim has to be the manager at the start of next season. There's absolutely pointless getting rid of him because you'll be in the same boat again, trying to build a squad for someone else, and you'll be starting from scratch. You have to give him the time to prove that he's the right. Because I genuinely don't think that we've seen enough from Ruben Amorim to know whether he's suited to this job or not. Mm-hmm. He's literally
survival season.
He's limping towards the end of the season, and he won't admit it, but if he could click his fingers and make the season disappear, he would do it in a heartbeat. He just has to get through the season as best he can, and we'll start in the summer with players he wants, with a pre-season, and then we'll start to see what he's really about at the start of next season. I
completely agree with you, Rob. Thank you very much for your time. It is now absolutely chucking it down in Manchester. But thank you everyone for watching. Get your comments in down below. What did you think about what Rob had to say? What do you think of Amorim, Sir Jim's interview? The new Old Trafford? Let us know. Hit a like on the video if you haven't already, and we will see you on the next one.